Hello, welcome back. I'm here again on my own, the single solitary Inwit. Have not heard from Jack, but that's okay. I am just going to plod along and do these anyway because I love them. So I'm just going to do a bit of a wrap up on this week's episodes of Australian Survivor. But before I touch on that, if anyone's watching Survivor South Africa, that last tribal, would like to touch on that. I mean, I am a big fan of Chappie's at the moment. He's handling himself so well. And that tribal, it was just like a bunch of kids having a cry. It's tribal management all over the shop. You're just giving Chappie's the win. In a different sense that last South African season, they just handed Rob the win. And they were quite happy to hand him the win. This time round, they're just giving Chappie's the win because they're sore losers. The whole he cheated and he had an unfair advantage was said by the person who actually won an advantage in the game. So the guy had an advantage and still having a bit of a complaint. Anyway, just wanted to touch on that. That was a great tribal. But anyway, we'll focus on the Australian episodes. I think it's episode 16, 17, 18 or 17, 18, 19. Not 100% sure. But we did start off with the Gerald blindside. This should have been a textbook play of removing Emmett, and in turn Emmett survives another two tribals. And it just shows how Dani's approach, she's not reading the room. There's the way she can kind of just went to go take Emmett's head, pretty much screwed up that whole plan. Yes, these moments where you do win a challenge, where you win a reward challenge and you can go off together and have fun, they win their KFC, you still got to feel out the area, see what people are wanting to do, see where the movement is. If you start just demanding and throwing down, this is what's got to happen, without actually gauging where people are sitting, get the feelers out. Throw out a couple of things like, oh, geez, be nice to win. Like, great that we got a reward, but be nice to get an immunity one at a time. Emmett hasn't lost yet. And then if everyone starts to get on board, it's like, yeah, he might win them all. Well, what do we do? What if he wins them all? What if he doesn't win one? Just, you always have to try and put it out there and see who's going to take the bait. You can't just throw out this ultimatum to everyone and have them accept it, because you don't know what's going to follow. You need to have a little bit more caution in your approach. And Dani, no caution whatsoever. She's hell-bent on being the alpha slayer, as Emmett called her out to be. But by doing this, I mean, unfortunately, it's like she should have been gone long ago. Hayley screwed up her plan earlier when she kept her around. This over-the-top, bold outing of someone is not going to do you very well in the long run. And in the end, it does put her heavily on the back foot. And she's lucky. She's lucky that George, who is just, as I said last week, what Jack would always say is mistakes are great early on. George is now in this really solid position. However, there's obviously some mistakes that were made that probably should have been avoided and would have helped him out a hell of a lot more. But mistakes were made, but still George is just taking the information. When that first happened, when the split between Dani and Emmett started to take place, originally I was trying to think about what you should do, and George has gone for Gerald, gone for a blindside with Gerald. Part of me was like, you could just let the idol be flushed and let Dani go home. But then you still have the tight three of Gerald, Flick, and Emmett. So George's move to take out Gerald wasn't actually too bad at all. I think that was a really solid play. We see a bit of unity for a short amount of time between the Brain tribe, and you have to play that way. You have to play that way when you are hearing, especially if you're in with the good tribe, in with the Brawn tribe, which Cara and George are, and all you hear from the leader of this alliance, Emmett, and the subordinates, Brawn strong, Brawn strong, Brawn strong, you should know that you're on the bottom of that alliance. Once doesn't matter, as long as the brain goes, the brain goes. And sooner or later, you'll be the next brain to go, which is a horrible great gameplay that's going on at the start from this Brawn tribe, which this is the catalyst for a bit of movement. But this is why George takes on getting the brains and collecting the brains and going after a Gerald, which was a really, really solid little move. Then it throws everybody a little out of whack. The Brawns thought they had this great plan. They now definitely have the minority, even though they've had the minority for so long, but still been controlling the tribe. We have Emmett and Flick by themselves and Dani by herself. A clear division which ends up coming together again through their distrust of George, which I am still baffled to how they thought they could trust George. Maybe they actually believed him with the George and Hayley little bout 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, last week. Maybe they believed that George was on their side and wasn't the rat, wasn't the mole. But this has definitely exposed George as someone they can't trust. They don't know how to go about it. And then we obviously get that the next episode, or was that the third episode? No, it was the third episode with Flick's mum, which is, man, we've seen people lose a parent or lose someone while they've been filming on the show, but for Flick to stick around, I know she completely explains it, and for those, I know she's getting a little bit of flack online about how could she stay with people. Just, I guess people have their own opinions, but you can't judge someone for doing what they want to do. So she stays when her mum passes away, and she has a really beautiful thing on her Instagram that I just watched about why she did it, and it's been a 6-year process. But I was just like, whoa, the courage to just stick around. And I was like, well, is it the current climate we're in, going back, lockdowns, what's the funeral going to be like anyway? Could anyone be there at that time? But we've never seen someone just stay. Never seen someone stay after that. They usually leave the game, and I thought that was a pretty amazing moment. But that's nothing to do with strategy. I'm here for strategy. That's what this is about. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that. I think it was a really brave decision to stick around and play. If she was to get to the end, she wins on heartstrings, but she probably won't get to the end. Next, we have this moment where after George has made the move on Gerald, he could have kept his target low. He's increased it by pushing it on Gerald. He could have let Dani go quite easily, and no one would have been much the wiser. But he really is about making these moves, and he's making a lot of moves. He's got a hell of a resume. Ignoring the mistakes early in the game, his post-merge has been really solid, and he's doing very, very well. Even post-mix-up, when he went to the Brawn tribe, he's playing a really solid game and has a very strong resume, but he's burning pretty quickly and that pretty brightly. And that flame will probably there's a chance for it to be extinguished before he gets to the final. But because he's put himself on the outs, the next episode we see him and Cara completely ousted and isolated from everyone else, and everyone else kind of gets together. And we have that really interesting immunity where the people who finish fourth, the last 4 people who finish, are the ones that are going to be voted home. And here I was having this strategy and plan going, when you hear something like this, they won't be voted out. Because I'm just trying to plan for the day that comes that I'm on this show. When are you making your moves? And when you hear only the bottom 4 people can be voted out, I'm thinking something fishy. Unfortunately, that would have screwed me over. This was a proper vote, and we left with Way, Cara, Laura, and Dani, who are the last 4 that are up for elimination here. For some strange reason, Cara becomes enemy number one from the Brain tribe? Is it the concept of the power couple between George and Cara, and you want to break them up? Because to me, I feel Dani was possibly the vote I would have gone for. Another Brawn can be gone, but another person who does want to play a big game. And they're always dangerous. She could do something. She wants to make a move. She knows she needs to build her resume. So I really feel Dani would have been the smart pick there. Emmett and Flick don't have a case to keep her. They don't have the numbers to keep her anymore, and it just weakens them that little bit further. But to just get rid of Cara because we can, a Brain is now expendable. I think Andrew said that, and Andrew's starting to come. We haven't seen much of Andrew this whole time, apart from bits and bobs. Now we're getting quite a bit of him, so I'm assuming he'll be voted out next week pretty quickly. And also just purely because of his strategic plays and how he reacts so far. How he reacted with Hayley trying to save herself, and how he just threw her under the bus and was like, nothing to do with you, and how he starts to react from here on. It's not good Survivor. It really isn't good Survivor in the slightest. But we see this moment where Andrew wants to take a bit of control, and Hayley probably has a better option. But she knows she still needs to come in and redeem herself. The phoenix rising from the ashes was a theme in one episode. The amount of times she said she was going to redeem herself after Redemption Rock. Good on her. She had to really decrease her target and just shut up. You have to lay low for a couple of days, lay low for a couple of tribals, let other people make the move. Totally fine. But then Andrew takes control, and he does mention that Cara, she's expendable. We can get rid of Dani whenever. And then Cara is trying to pitch for getting rid of Wei because Wei will win. I don't know why Wei would win. Wei has done nothing. Wei has been, like, no offense to Gerald, he had some great ways he talked at Tribal, but he hadn't done anything anyway. You can take him to the end. He doesn't have a resume. He sat through. You didn't really see much of what he said regarding the Dani wanting to vote Emmett. He just was a passenger. Wei is a massive passenger. She's not contributing. She played with emotion early on. Didn't forgive George because even though George saved her at the start. For Cara to think Wei is going to win the game is just, there's something we're not seeing if people assume or have an inkling that Wei could win. Because to me, I'm taking Wei to the end. As if I had to take a goat, I'm taking Wei. She's easy to just win against from what I've been watching. And of course, we're not shown everything. We all know that. And you do watch Cara while she's running up and down in that challenge going, please keep me safe, please, begging, which is really pathetic. So Cara can't win either. I don't know where Cara's done some really nice things with George, and she's a byproduct of George just controlling her. If you think about the old Russell Hance would always have that young female that he'd manipulate. Not that this is the same thing, but this is the equivalent for George, is just keeping Cara around, and Cara is really important for George. George gets to the end with Cara, it's because, apart from him being saved once, but it's because he kept her there. She didn't need to be there. And we find out in this tribal where George goes and finds this key, this is the mistake here. George finds the key that gives him the secret idol hidden at the tribal voting box, where he can put it in and be anonymous. No one knows he saved Cara. And it's a great idea. It's a really great idea he doesn't want to change his vote. It's all 7 on Cara, and Cara's 1 vote determines that Laura goes home. Because he plays this idol here. Saves her again because it's really important for him to go forward with her. And also he even says that Cara wants to get rid of Wei, but Wei is important to me because I can beat Wei. Anybody can beat Wei. Let's get rid of Laura. So really great plan. The problem we have with this plan is that this secret idol play doesn't become a secret in the end. He's exposed very heavily and really, really screws up his game going forward. He can probably still get to the end. He's doing really well, but it was a bad play. What should have happened is he should have just given the key and the clue to Cara prior, because we said that follow-up episode where Andrew going on his really uncomfortable "I've got to get rid of George" moment, and I think it says next week he says the same thing, "I'm here to get rid of George." Worst mentality to have. He's like, I was watching Cara and Cara thought she was going home. Cara was so shocked that this idol had been played for her. She had no idea it was coming. So for George to want to hide behind this move, he needs Cara in on the move. And to get Cara in on the move, the easiest way is just to give her the idol. Just give it to her. Give her the key and the clue and be like, this will keep you safe. I had nothing to do with it. Just take it. Palm it to her just as you're packing up. Simple. But instead he plays it himself. And is this him playing it himself so he, come final tribal, he can now officially claim that move because he did it? Whereas Cara might be able to play it, or claim it if Cara gets there, which he wants Cara to get to the end. I don't know. I just think it's a little bit of a blip in, he's still making mistakes. He's not flawless. He's playing a great game, but that was a huge mistake, which then exposed him way too much. When if he'd palmed that off to Cara, Cara doesn't say anything, does it herself. She kind of knows it's happening. It looks like she was in control. And then when people are watching her reaction, she's confident and she knows she's got this in the bag. Whereas before, it came as a total shock. She was surprised. It's blown George's cover. It's like sometimes when you see the bad acting stuff, and you're like, oh, when you see people act like it was a fate, like they didn't know it was coming at tribal. That's what we had, but that she actually didn't know she actually didn't know it was happening. So it wasn't bad acting. It was truthful acting. It was truthful. It wasn't even acting. It was truthful, but it exposed George as the person who would have done it. There was no one else that would have saved her, and everyone had hints. George whispering to Hayley is, nothing's changed, has it? Why? Have you got something to save Cara? Are you going to save Cara? No, I got nothing. All this would have been completely disregarded if he had given her the key, let Cara play the move, and he could have acted as shocked as everyone else was. That said, he is still pretty good with how he talks at tribal. He's very, very good. He's just progressing very well as a player. He's becoming he's a very interesting player, but he's becoming a strong strategic player. And probably, I still think Hayley's a stronger player, but Hayley fell on the wrong side of the numbers, or maybe a bit smarter than a George, because George is too showy. George is making sure he's made those moves, whereas Hayley, she's kind of doing it in the shadows, which I kind of prefer. But then that following episode, we do get Andrew going on his anger tantrum and joining up with the Brains and with the Brawns, and then there's that weird moment at the well where George comes over and Andrew's like, can you please leave? Out of respect, we need to discuss something privately. Like, what are you doing, Andrew? Like, what is that? That's just, you're playing emotionally, you're not thinking, and your idea, like, he's still on your side. He saved one person for him. Have you asked him about it? Do you know why he's done it that way? You're not communicating with him, and you've started to react emotionally. And though Andrew is starting to wake up as a challenge competitor, is this what he was like all along? And I did say last week that, did he really mean, like, he's a survival expert and he couldn't make a fire? Has he just pulling himself back and trying to make sure he doesn't have that big threat? and he's now starting to increase it and challenge Emmett and starting to win some stuff. Because that's what you'd want to do as a physical threat, hold back and start to win a little later on. He's probably starting to win a little early. That's if that's what he's doing. But the emotional response that he gets to just hating everything about George, whereas George is the reason they're still kicking. They're in the game because of George. And he's just flipped and turned his head, and now he's teamed up with the minority, which sounds bizarre. It sounds bizarre to be sitting there in a majority alliance and then turn on them to side with the minority. You're siding with 3 lonely Brawn, who you know are Brawn strong at the end, even through their little hiccup, and when they came against each other, they're still back to Brawn strong, and you've joined that. You've become number 4. And then if Hayley was there, as Hayley said, I'm not going to be number 5 in your alliance, because Hayley gets it. Hayley gets what they're about. Andrew joining a team of 3 that have been together since day 1, where do you think you're going once you get rid of everyone else? You're 4th, mate. You're not making it to the end. So there's no strategic gameplay there from Andrew. It's just all coming from this emotional reaction to what George did and how deceiving George has played the game. Whereas, I mean, I can't remember what he said. I watched it early this morning, but that's the game. The game is to deceive. It's to outwit, outlast, outplay. This isn't a loving family and having a good old time every day and just picking off the person we like the least, because that's horrible anyway. The game is to manipulate other people. That's what Survivor is all about. And George is doing a wonderful job. And just because you're not even on the bad end of the manipulation. It's just he's manipulating and taking away things that you wanted to do. You wanted to get rid of Cara because you didn't like Cara's hugging and begging and whatever it was. You wanted that and it didn't happen. And so what you do, your response is to be angry about it and all guns blazing aimed at George. You end up putting a target on yourself. Just sit back, just chill. Things happen. The game should be fluid. Australian Survivor is a little bit rigid, and it's nice to see some fluidity within alliances now. But I was thinking about that, the friendship element that I think Dani and Flick mentioned when they had that little reunion, when they came together again. American Survivor was 39 days. It's now 28, I think, in the next season when we see that. But 39 days. Around 35 days, we still are just hitting merge in Australian Survivor. So the friendship element probably is a much stronger tie in with Australian Survivor than it would be with American Survivor, because day 35, we're hitting merge. Day 35, there's like 2 people, 3, there's 4 people left. We're getting into the final days of Survivor. So there is, I think there's, at day 35, there might have been still 10 people. There's so many people left. So the friendship element and betrayal might be a bit harder, and that might be why it affects Andrew, the manipulation side, because you've spent so much time with each other. But it just made no sense. It made no strategic sense to pull everyone together to be angry at George for playing the game of Survivor and also exposing himself as someone George needs to get rid of. If you're going to strike on someone, you want to make sure that they don't know it's coming, that they don't know it's you. You want to do, even though Hayley made that mistake, when Hayley went for Dani had no idea it was coming. When George went for Gerald, Dani had no idea that the idol was being played and that there was another plan in place. She had no idea. This is what you want to do. Whereas Andrew is now winning a couple of immunities. Emmett's gone, so he's the only real physical alpha male floating around. that is hot-headed, that is gunning for one of the most strategic players, his time's numbered. Like, his days are numbered. He's probably one of the next to go. I would love to see Hayley versus George again, because I do really rate Hayley a little bit higher than George, even though right now George wins. For me, if I was voting, if I was on Tribal, you can't stop George from winning right now unless you get him out, because he's just playing such a strong, bold game. Still 10 days to go for them, so there's still a lot that can happen, but we're getting to the final legs. Getting rid of Emmett was the correct play by Hayley, and we see, I mean, the edit showed us that maybe Hayley and Way were going to get rid of George, but if that was the case, Cara would have played the idol. So we weren't shown all the conversations that were had. Hayley and George probably had some other conversations that really locked that in, because there was no doubt that if there was, the idol would have been played, but they were very confident that Hayley and Way were going to do the vote, and that was it. Emmett was gone, and it makes sense, because Emmett had no social game. Emmett, that's the problem. He was I guess he was a likable guy, but his social play, when he says, if I don't have the idol, or when he doesn't have the idol, he's exposed, he's vulnerable, this is the only way I can get through. It means he doesn't have the actual social gameplay to get him through any further. So getting rid of him, I think, was the right move from Hayley and George's perspective, because you need to open up the chance to other people to win an immunity, because that allows some more movement. If someone is going to dominate, and the chances are 80% Emmett's going to win the individual immunity, it really limits your way to play the game, because he's always going to be there. And if he goes on a run, a lot of Brawn people, they might just vote him to win, because he was so physically competitive and dominating. And in Australian Survivor, that is a very physical game compared to the American one, which we might be seeing a change with Hayley and George being so strategic, which is amazing. Maybe that's going to be rewarded for the win. Anyway, he goes home, which was the right move. And then we really just need to see how George and Hayley are going to play, because they're the real players that are left in this game, in my opinion. It's going to be between George and Hayley, and who can outmaneuver the other. The game, everyone else is a pawn on this chessboard, and it is king versus queen. And yeah, you usually want to protect your king, but your queen is the most powerful piece. So my votes and my bets on Hayley. Anyway, I might just wrap that up there. I still haven't found a flow without Jack, but I'm having fun. Hope you guys are too. Anyway, thanks for watching.